Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ. This morning, I have, to put it best, an infomercial for you. And so, what if I were to tell you that I have a tool that all of you can have, and it's entirely free. Somebody else paid for it for you. You just have to sort of call it and get it. But it's a tool that all of you are able to use. And in getting this tool and in using it, there's more or less the guarantee that if you were to drink poison, you'd be fine. That if you were to try to take a trip, you would befall no danger. That if somebody wanted to harm you, you'd be protected. And that if you were struggling with something, suddenly the burden would become much easier. It sounds like a miracle, right? If I were to be offering this on TV, of course there would be multiple payment installments, and it would be exorbitant. And then you would get it and you'd find out that it was a little bit lackluster. It's not the miracle that you thought it was. I'm sure that everybody's seen that on television and they bought some mop for their house and their floors are still as dirty as they can be. But when we look at this and we have this idea of this miraculous tool, we have to wonder exactly what is it and why? Why do we need it? What's the point of it being in our life? And the reason that it's free and that somebody else bought it for you is that somebody else paid the price. So if I were to just be giving stuff away for free, you'd have to wonder, well, why is it free? We actually had this question, and many of you remember about a year ago, our stock of nut rolls was bought anonymously, and then they were given out. And as Pawnee and I were giving them out in the church, a bunch of people said, why are these for free? And a couple of people worried, like, are these bad? Should I be eating these? No, they were donated. Somebody else paid for you. Have them. Christ paid for you. Fronted the cost right up there. So you can just take this tool home. You can keep it, you're allowed to have it. And he bought it at the price of his own blood. Now, in you getting this tool, you can certainly say thank you to the man who bought it for you and offer him back your love. This is the sort of repayment that we can give. He has bought it for you. You give him your love back. And you might be asking yourself by now, what is this tool? And I'm sure that there's a lot of things that you can think that I'm leading up to. It's the Eucharist, it's something about the church, it's the Holy Church itself. But the tool is nothing more and nothing less than the sign of the cross. The simple gesture of our hand, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. It's very easy. And the reason that it is able to do all of these things is because, as every good infomercial has, there's a bunch of testimonials about it. You can read the stories of the saints who, one, in being challenged at faith in God, was given poison to drink. And in making the sign of the cross over his glass, and then eventually sort of tricking this other person into making the sign of the cross for him because he wasn't allowed to move his hand. Still, that sign of the cross saved him from being poisoned. We make the sign of the cross at every time that we get into our vehicles to drive somewhere, even if it's across a parking lot. I was told that by my mom when I was learning. She was probably very nervous about the fact that I was driving, and it was for her benefit. But at no point did we get into those flying metal death traps and not ask God to protect us. They're scary things. We take them for granted, but they're bad. But in all of these things, we have this protection. We have this tool that is free to use, but for a lot of us, especially those of us who have been born in the church and brought up in this, it becomes very, very passé. It becomes very normalized. How many of us have found ourselves swatting flies? I know I did for a long time. Before I got to seminary, and I felt guilty about it. I realized that nobody else is doing that. That's where you're supposed to be making the sign of the cross. You realize other people are doing it, and you try to catch up, and it's there. You kind of know what you're doing. You're getting to the point, but you're just waving your hand around your face. For the rest of Lent, take this opportunity to use this tool purposefully. Because that's what it is a tool. I can't very well give you a hammer that is the best made hammer in the world and ask you to go and unscrew a couple of panels for me. It won't work. You're just going to break them in half. It's the same thing. We can make the sign of the cross all we want, but if we're not doing it with purpose, if we are not doing it with thoughtfulness, we might as well be swatting flies. And so, when we think about this, we recognize exactly what it is that we are doing. And the reason that I bring this up this Sunday is because, as you saw in the icon out front, if you see in the icon in front of us, on the second Sunday of Great Lent, we commemorate St. Gregory Palamas. And he is remembered specifically for what he brought us in Lent, which is the idea of hesychasm. It's a big word, but basically it just means very prayerful silence. The repetition of the Jesus prayer as a way to center yourself and to focus wholly upon God. But before we get there, we have to get back to some fundamentals that we have. It would be a really, hopefully helpful sermon if I told you all about hesychasm and brought you all the way into that with learning about it. But if we're all sort of missing the point of the very cross that we make throughout all of liturgy and all of our lives, then one thing doesn't really help the other. We get back to our fundamentals. And this is something that any monastic would understand. Gregory Palamas would understand in bringing this to us. You start with the basic. You don't run out and become the best monk the next day because you just joined the monastery. You don't run out and become the best Christian because you joined the church. We get there. It's a process. And so for those who do not know, when we make the sign of the cross, be purposeful about everything you do. When you hold your hand, we hold it a certain way for a reason. And there's a purpose to this. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as I'm sure you know. And then our fingers being the two natures of Christ. We are carrying in one hand the entirety of the Trinity and the full knowledge of who God is to us. That's a pretty powerful thing to hold in one hand. And this is the same thing that a priest does when they are blessing, is they hold the entire name of Christ in their hand. My fingers, if you look at them closely, and if I were to sort of bend it around the right way, spell out the initials of Christ. ICXE, Jesus Christos. That is the blessing. I'm not blessing with my hand. I'm not doing some, voodoo up here. I'm sending the name of Christ to you. And so when we do this, we are carrying the Holy Trinity. And the very tool of destruction that Christ gave to us now becomes the tool for us to use in all of our lives in coming to Him. And so be purposeful about this. Know that when you're making the sign of the cross, you're doing it slowly, deliberately. You're not swatting at flies, but you are actively thinking, this is what I'm doing. If I'm getting into a car, what am I asking for? I'm asking for protection in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. This is my protection. Not a weird symbol, but the thing. The actual substance of the Trinity being with us. And remember this throughout Lent, that especially next week, as we endeavor to have a joyous celebration of the exaltation of the cross, as the third Sunday of Lent always has. Now we can see in front of us the tool that Christ turned for us to be able to use and carry around. So you have a week to think about this. To every time that you make the sign of the cross, to do so deliberately. To every time that you don't make the sign of the cross and you forget about it, to think, maybe I should stop and do this. I know it's hard sometimes to remember when you're about to go and eat to pray. But if you make the sign of the cross beforehand, you're already doing a good job. And if you forget and you're halfway through your meal, stop anyway and make the sign of the cross. God's not going to penalize you and say, well, that food's cursed now because you blessed it too late. No. Be deliberate. Always recognize that we carry this tool. That we are able to use it at any time, and that Christ has given it to us for free. And something that is not, looks good there, but doesn't really work. It looks good all the time. And it perpetually works for our salvation. We are granted this. Don't take it for granted. Be deliberate. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst.
Yes, and always shall be.